All right, well, for more on capital cities, we're joined by Uwe Brandes. He's the Executive Director of the Urban and Regional Planning Program at Georgetown University right here in DC. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Uwe, historically, we've seen countries move their capitals over the years, and it's usually been for strategic reasons. So in modern times, what are some of the reasons to move a capital?
Well, sometimes in cases of countries such as France with Paris or London and UK, you have a phenomenon where the capital city becomes the primary city of the entire country. Of course, congestion and many other economic factors lead to open questions about moving the capital city in order to achieve a different kind of regional development paradigm.
Now, what could some of those development goals be?
Well, in some cases, they're very pragmatic. Housing for government workers, decongesting traffic in a major metropolitan region. And then, of course, there are symbolic considerations. The desire to create a new city that is emblematic and representational of the government and the symbolic function of government.
Something to reflect the changing times in the country. Now, that's one option. And now in the case of Manila, they're actually looking for multiple capitals.
Yeah.
What are some of the pros and cons there?
Well, as we heard in the report, there is an underlying economic development paradigm associated with this. Moving the capital doesn't mean just moving capital buildings. It means moving staff, which creates a housing development function. It means building new infrastructure that facilitates other industries. So there's a comprehensive economic strategy behind a move like this.
And what are some of perhaps the negative connotations that come with that?
Well, building a new city is a long-term endeavor. This is not something that's measured in 1 year to another year. Often it's not measured in 1 decade to another decade. This is a very long-term investment proposal. And so the expectation can be created that the city will be invented overnight. And then we know that here in our city, in Washington, D.C., it's 200 years after the original plan was made for Washington, and we continue to strategize how the city can be built out.
So for some people who are wondering about whether the cost is worth it to move a capital, and as you're saying, it could be decades or even hundreds of years before they see the results. So how do they placate people if they're trying to wonder why it's ever worth the effort?
Well, anyone evaluating a proposal like this in the short term is likely to see major challenges. There are so many fixed and sunken costs associated with infrastructure development that will not be recouped on the short term. This is really a long-term nation-building decision. So the payoff is really over many generations and many different kinds of multi-sector development objectives.
And so ideally, if you're scouting for a new capital or a second capital, what are some of the factors that would really make one area stand out perhaps over another?
Well, beyond some of the pragmatics associated with real estate development and infrastructure development, there really are very important symbolic considerations. What kind of landscape will the capital be situated in? What is its relationship to topography? Of course, many questions around natural resources and how the city will be sustained over time.
And speaking of sustaining cities, we're going to see that usually these capitals are usually very highly populated cities, as you were saying, and the UN predicts that the global urban population will grow to more than 6 billion people by the year 2050,
yes.
Mostly of that led by Asia. How is that going to affect how capitals grow?
Well, it's a very, very important question because it's not always the case that capital cities are the largest cities. Even in the United States, with Washington's growth is a relatively recent phenomenon. For over a century, Washington was a small village that was neutral ground between larger cities like New York and Philadelphia. And in the case of in Brazil, this is also the case. There was a very concerted effort to locate the capital in neutral areas such that the other larger cities, such as Rio and Sao Paulo, could kind of continue to function on their own terms. So this has huge opportunities associated with it for the Philippines, but never underestimate the challenges.
And just quickly, lastly, for people who are trying to understand the relevance, why do we even need a capital city? What would you tell them?
Well, as you mentioned before, we live in a time of unprecedented urbanization. People want to live in cities. And as an anchor, there is no greater anchor than the federal government in any country. And so this is an extraordinary opportunity to really rethink what urbanism means in the Philippines and how a new sustainable paradigm can not just be discussed, but implemented.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Uwe Brandes from Georgetown University, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.